I'm a gardener. We grow tomatoes and peppers, and this year we grew hundreds of tomatoes from just 3 bushes. Literally, we've been giving them away. You know how people give away zucchini desperately? We've been doing the same with tomatoes. And this year, we grew peppers, poblano peppers. They use them to make chile relleno, which we love in our house. And like the tomatoes, they were remarkably abundant. Our soil is rich and fertile and vibrant, and it's thrilling. We have lawn care people who come from the Homeowners Association, and every week I put out 2 Pepsis for the workers. And all summer I've been saying, please take our tomatoes. Please, we have peppers to spare. I'm not a farmer, but I'm a gardener. I love that we're able to grow so much. It is astonishing. In fact, Bill and I are now having the conversation of next year we won't plant so much. Our first time at planting in our great earth in San Jose, California, we wondered how many tomato bushes would we need as a twosome. So we planted 9. It was shocking. The next year we thought we don't need that many. We just need 5. No. My favorite part of the grocery store? The produce. Don't you love being in the produce department? All those colors, all that beauty, bananas, pineapples, avocado, apples. All of that is just, well, it makes me feel safe. All that beauty makes me feel safe, that there is enough to eat, that there is enough to nourish us. And I'm mindful that that is the purpose of the writer of Genesis, to remind us that the land is meant to be abundant. So walk into Genesis with me now. Let's spend a little time there. There in Genesis, there is the sea, and then God says, let the seas be separated, and God gathers land and pushes and pulls and molds and shapes, and God says that that is good. The Hebrew is tov, so it's more than just good. Very good. It's extravagant. God is pleased and thrilled with the beauty of the land, and then God gives the land a purpose. It's not meant to just lie there fallow, empty, unproductive, but God says, bring forth, yield. And so there is so much. It's like God didn't know you should only plant 9 tomato plants. There is abundance beyond belief. And God says again, it is tov. Very good. Wonderful. So while we're there, walking around in Genesis, as the writer intends, having us picture God shaping and forming the land into a whole, into an abundance that will yield every good seed and every good fruit. Begin to imagine the seas of your own mother's womb, the waters in which you began to form, where God gathered in the waters of your mother's womb your own being, creating a land that was Susan, Lynn, Betty, Ginny, shaping and forming this land that is meant to yield and have the same purpose that the land in the early creation had, that it would be abundant and fertile, that it would be glorious, that God would, looking into your mother's womb, into those waters that held you when you were first being gathered by the hand of God, And God said about you, Tov, very good, extraordinary, essential to the life of the world. You in those warm waters were called Tov. And then there was morning and evening and the day you were born. Such a land we are in our very corpus, in our bellies, in our legs, in our arms, meant to yield what is abundant. But there is a purpose. There is a purpose, and Isaiah or Deuteronomy declares that purpose for us this morning. That the immigrant, the widow, and the poor should always have what? Enough. That the land that is around us and that the land that is us is meant to bring forth and yield fruit of all kind, so that the world might be fed, not just with an apple or a zucchini or a pumpkin, but that you and I might yield compassion, forgiveness, mercy, yielding that into a world that is hungry and longing. Jesus says it in a different way. He reminds us that the poor belong to God. Those who are outside, those who are marginalized, those who are immigrants, those who gather at borders seeking the fertile ground of what you and I can provide as God's land. And the only way, in my observation, that the poor and the homeless and the immigrant ever know that they belong to God is when you and I are fertile in what we yield into the world. When what it is that we give is welcome and hospitality and forgiveness. And that's rooted in what Deuteronomy says. Remember, God asks, when you were slaves in Egypt and I redeemed you, remember when you were lonely? When you felt landless? When the land around you of your own life felt dry and arid and empty, remember, God asks, when I redeemed you? When I gave you friendship? When I told you that you belong to me, remember, God says? Well, this week, I fussed. I was fussed. I was thinking on Saturday, Pastor Chuck, I never want to preach again because it's so disruptive. God is so busy in my head. I kept looking at the land thinking, oh, how will I bring that alive? And then this morning, brushing my teeth, I recommend it for preachers because it occurred to me. I remembered when I was an immigrant. Do you? Or you have been an immigrant. Every single one of you here has come to a place where you were afraid you would not be welcomed. Every single one of us has come to the border of a place wondering if hospitality would be extended to us. We are, each and every one of us, immigrants, longing to be welcomed, longing to be forgiven, longing to be offered friendship, so that we might be fertile, full of vibrancy, 9 tomato plants worth. 1979, I went to seminary. I was an immigrant. I was not welcome in that new land. Women, preachers, classmates and teachers alike didn't know what to do with us. We were immigrants, 5 of us. My classmates said to me, "What more do you want? We let you come." We say that to our immigrants in our own nation. We let you come. You need to speak our language. You need to adopt our habits. We let you come. So inhospitable, it fell upon my heart. For I had been gathered in my mother's womb, and God had given me a purpose to tell the stories of the gospel. I belonged there, and yet I was an immigrant who was unwelcomed. You know that story. You've started a job, moved into a neighborhood, tried something new, even married into a family who wasn't really sure about you. You've been an immigrant. We share that in common with all those who gather at borders, every single one of them waiting for hospitality, waiting for a welcome. In the classroom, I was talking to Noah, the 10-year-old grandson, and I said, "Are you looking forward to school?" "Yes." "Why is that?" "I hope there won't be bullies in my classroom again this year." We know what it's like to be the poor, the left out, the widowed in all kinds of ways. And yet God created this land. And so here I was, this immigrant, and they speak a foreign language, not just Hebrew and Greek. We were at a consortium of seminaries. There were 9. And the very first day they said, if you want to go by the library, it's across from JSTB and the PCR campus, and then the initials were maddening. I didn't understand any of it. And then I went to classes and they said things like theophany and, other things. And for years, that whole first year, I thought they were talking about the long gospel, LONG. And I kept thinking, well, I'm not sure what the long gospel is. And I kept thinking I should raise my hand and ask. There's no stupid questions, but I knew somehow that would be. At the end of that year, I realized they had never once said the long gospel. They were talking about the law and gospel. I was an immigrant in a land of people who did not speak my language, who weren't hospitable. We let you come. You need to do it our way or go away. Well, a friend of mine in Southern California, we were in Berkeley. I'd call her all through that year when I was feeling lost and lonely and like a land that was parched and dry. And she would pick up the phone in Long Beach and she would hear somebody going, say, "Hi, Susan." It's funny now, but I was full of tears. It was a foreign land. You know about that. You know the loneliness of that. You have your own longing to be in a place where the yield is abundant, where there is something to nourish your soul. So our home congregation paid my tuition. which was lovely. And at the end of that first year, I went home and I met with the council. And I thought, they're just going to hear this horror story about how hard it was and how I cried all the time and how everything was such an effort. And so I sat at council, and I probably cried again because it had become habitual. And at the end of the table sat Pastor Ed. He was in his 80s, which seemed old then, I'll tell you, but doesn't seem nearly that. I mean, it was a spring chicken, right? So after I told this tale of woe, Pastor Ed, without even looking up, said so quietly, "It sounds like you're where you need to be." He carved out a place in a land for me. This God who pulled you out of the seas of your mother's womb, who tells you to remember when you were an immigrant, when you were a slave in Egypt, so that you would be mindful of God's command, which is to leave something for the immigrants who follow you, for those who are bereft, for those who come seeking hospitality and welcome. So 4 years ago, I came to this place, and once again, I was an immigrant. And you welcomed me. You reminded me that I belong to God. That is what we are formed to do. That is our purpose. That the world would be lavished with the generosity that you and I yield into the lives of others. And when God looks at that, God says, Tov, very good. And there was morning, there was evening, and there is you and today. Amen.